The mountain lion's scream tore through the Arizona desert twilight like a knife through silk. And Zara Fleming knew in that instant. She was going to die 500 miles from the nearest theater. She had been walking back to the film crew's temporary camp outside Bisbee, her costume skirts bunched in her hands to keep them from dragging through the dust and scrub brush. The director had dismissed them early when the light had grown too dim for filming, and she had volunteered to retrieve the forgotten script pages from the location wagon. Now, as the sun bled orange across the jagged horizon and that unholy shriek echoed off the canyon walls, she understood what a fatal mistake that had been. The cat emerged from behind a cluster of prickly pear cacti not 30 yards ahead, its tawny body rippling with muscle in the fading light. Zara froze, every instinct screaming contradictions. Run. Stay still. Scream, be quiet. Her throat had gone completely dry and her fingers lost their grip on the heavy cotton of her costume. She had played dozens of roles in her 23 years, had died dramatically on stage in New York and San Francisco, but none of those performances had prepared her for the reality of facing down a predator that saw her as nothing more than meat. The mountain lion took a step forward, its yellow eyes fixed on her with an intelligence that was somehow worse than mindless hunger. Its shoulders bunched, tail twitching, and Zara knew without being told that this was the moment before it sprang. She opened her mouth to scream, though whether for help or simply to break the terrible silence, she would never know. The gunshot cracked across the desert like thunder. The mountain lion jerked sideways, snarling, and wheeled to face this new threat. Zara's legs finally remembered how to move, and she stumbled backward, tripping over her own skirts and landing hard on the rocky ground. Through the dust and her own terror, she saw him. He sat astride a paint horse perhaps 50 feet away, a rifle still raised to his shoulder. He was silhouetted against the dying sun, all hard angles and controlled stillness, and even in her panic, Zara recognized the posture of someone who knew exactly what he was doing. The cowboy fired again, and this time the bullet kicked up dirt directly in front of the mountain lion's paws. The cat hesitated, hissing, caught between two potential threats. "Get up," the man called out, his voice carrying clearly across the space between them. "Slowly. Do not run." Zara struggled to her feet, her hands shaking so badly she could barely manage it. The mountain lion was watching her again, watching them both, calculating. The cowboy urged his horse forward a few careful steps, placing himself more firmly between her and the predator. "When I tell you," he said, his voice calm in a way that made Zara want to simultaneously laugh and cry, "you walk backward toward me. Keep your eyes on the cat. Make yourself big. You understand?" "Yes," Zara managed, though her voice came out as barely more than a whisper. "Now." She moved backward, forcing her legs to obey despite how badly they wanted to simply collapse. The mountain lion tracked her movement, lips pulled back from teeth that looked far too large and sharp. The cowboy fired another shot into the air, the sound making Zara flinch despite expecting it, and the cat finally seemed to decide this meal was not worth the trouble. It turned with a final snarl and vanished into the scrub brush as swiftly as it had appeared. Zara's knees gave out the moment it disappeared from view. She sat down hard in the dirt for the second time, her breath coming in sharp gasps that she could not quite control. The cowboy dismounted and was beside her in 3 long strides, the rifle held easily in one hand. "You hurt?" he asked. She shook her head, not trusting her voice. Now that the immediate danger had passed, her whole body was shaking, adrenaline making her fingertips tingle and her vision swim. She pressed her palms flat against the ground, trying to anchor herself to something solid and real. "Can you stand?" "I think so," Zara said. "Give me a moment." He waited, not hovering but not leaving either, and after several long breaths she felt steady enough to attempt getting up again. He offered his hand and she took it without thinking. His palm was calloused and warm, his grip strong enough to pull her to her feet with no apparent effort. She found herself looking up into a face that was all sharp cheekbones and sun-weathered skin, with eyes the color of storm clouds. He was perhaps 26 or 27, she guessed, with dark hair that needed cutting and the kind of stillness about him that spoke of long days spent in wild country. "Thank you," Zara said, and then, because it seemed inadequate, "You saved my life." "You are one of the film people," he said. It was not quite a question. "Yes, I'm an actress. We've been shooting scenes for a Western picture about 3 miles that way." She gestured vaguely toward where she thought the camp was, though in truth, she had gotten somewhat turned around in her panic. "I was just walking back when that thing appeared." "Mountain lion," he said. "Big female, probably hunting before nightfall. You should not be out here alone." "I realize that now," Zara said, trying for a smile and not quite managing it. "I'm Zara Fleming, by the way. Kade Irwin." He turned to scan the darkening desert around them. "Your camp, it is the one set up near the old copper mine." "I think so. I'm not really familiar with the area." "I know it," Kade said. "I will take you back. It is not safe to walk after dark, and that cat might circle around." The thought of the mountain lion returning made Zara's stomach clench. "I would appreciate that very much, Mr. Irwin." "Just Kade," he said, and moved back to his horse. The paint mare stood exactly where he had left her, ground tied by trailing reins, and Kade gathered them up with the ease of long practice. "Can you ride?" "Not in this costume," Zara admitted, looking down at the elaborate period dress that the film's costume designer had insisted was absolutely necessary for authentic Western atmosphere. "It weighs about 20 pounds and has approximately 1,000 buttons." Something that might have been amusement flickered across Kade's face. "You can ride double with me then. It is not far." He mounted first, then extended his hand down to her again. Zara hesitated, suddenly aware of how strange this was, climbing up onto a horse with a man she had met perhaps 5 minutes ago. But the alternative was walking back alone in the growing darkness with mountain lions lurking in the brush. So she took his hand and let him pull her up behind the saddle. The horse shifted but did not protest as Zara settled herself as best she could, her ridiculous skirts bunched awkwardly around her legs. "Hold on," Kade said, and Zara wrapped her arms around his waist, feeling the solid warmth of him through his worn cotton shirt. The horse started forward at a walk, and they headed into the desert twilight. For several minutes, they rode in silence. Zara was intensely aware of every point of contact between them, the shift of his muscles as he guided the horse, the steady rhythm of his breathing. The adrenaline was slowly draining from her system, leaving her feeling shaky and strange. She rested her forehead briefly against his shoulder blade, letting her eyes close. "You all right back there?" Kade's voice rumbled through his chest. "Just tired," Zara said. "And still a bit frightened, if I am being honest." "That is normal. Fear keeps you alive most times." "Is it always like this out here? Dangerous, I mean, if you are careless or unlucky," Kade said. "The desert does not care about your mistakes, neither do the animals. You learn to pay attention or you do not last long." "How long have you lasted?" "Been riding this country for near about 10 years, he said. "Since I was 17. "You must know it well then." "Well enough." He guided the horse around a deep wash in the ground that Zara would have walked straight into in the darkness. "What brings film people all the way out to Bisbee?" "The director wanted authentic locations," Zara explained. "He said audiences are tired of fake painted backdrops and studio sets." He wanted real desert, real mountains, real frontier towns. So here we are, a whole company of actors and crew members, most of whom have never been west of the Mississippi River until last month. And you've been west before, once to perform in San Francisco. But that was a city. This is different. She looked around at the vast emptiness surrounding them, the sky now deep purple and scattered with early stars. It is beautiful in a way that makes you feel very small. Yes, Kade said, and there was something in that single word that made Zara think he understood exactly what she meant. The camp came into view as they crested a low rise, a cluster of tents and wagons lit by the warm glow of campfires. Zara could see people moving around, and as they drew closer, she heard someone calling her name. The director, Mr. Harrison, came striding toward them, his round face creased with worry. "Miss Fleming, thank God, we were about to send out a search party." He pulled up short when he saw that she was riding double with a stranger. "What happened? Are you hurt?" Zara slid down from the horse with more haste than grace, her legs wobbly after the ride. "I encountered a mountain lion on my way back from the location wagon. Mr. Irwin here shot at it and scared it away. He saved my life." The statement created immediate commotion as the rest of the crew gathered around, everyone talking at once. Kade dismounted but stayed back from the crowd, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. The assistant director wanted to know exactly where the attack had happened. The leading man, Gerald, who played the heroic sheriff in their film, declared loudly that they should organize a hunting party immediately. Mrs. Chen, the costume designer, fussed over Zara's dusty and disheveled dress. Through it all, Zara found herself watching Kade. He stood apart from the chaos, holding his horse's reins, looking like he was already regretting having brought her back to civilization. When she finally managed to extract herself from the concerned crowd, she walked over to him. "Thank you again," she said quietly. "I know I already said it, but I feel like it bears repeating. You appeared exactly when I needed help most." "Just happened to be riding through," Kade said. "Wrong place, right time." "Or right place, right time, depending on your perspective," Zara said. She studied his face in the firelight, trying to understand the man who had appeared out of nowhere like something from one of the scripts she performed. "Do you live nearby? In Bisbee?" "I have a small ranch about 8 miles north of here," Kade said. "Run cattle, break horses, do some work for the bigger spreads when they need extra hands." "Miss Fleming," Mr. Harrison called out, "the doctor is here to examine you." "I am fine," Zara called back, but she could see the director was not going to be satisfied without a proper medical inspection. She turned back to Kade. "I should go before they send out another search party just to retrieve me from this conversation, but I would like to thank you properly. Will you come by tomorrow? For lunch, perhaps? We have a surprisingly good cook traveling with us." Kade hesitated, and Zara could see him weighing the offer. "I have work to do," he said finally. "Everyone has to eat," Zara pointed out. "Surely you can spare an hour." "I do not think I would fit well with theater people." "I do not think that should matter," Zara said. "Please, it would make me feel better to thank you with more than just words." He was quiet for a moment longer, then nodded once. "Noon, then, tomorrow." "Noon," Zara agreed, and found herself smiling genuinely for the first time since the mountain lion had screamed. "I will look forward to it." Kade touched the brim of his hat in farewell, mounted his horse, and rode off into the darkness. Zara watched him go until Mrs. Chen took her firmly by the arm and steered her toward the tent where the doctor was waiting. The medical examination revealed nothing more serious than some bruises from her fall and scraped palms from catching herself on the rocky ground. The doctor, a fussy little man from New York who seemed perpetually scandalized by the frontier, prescribed rest and calm, which made Zara laugh despite herself. Mr. Harrison, once convinced she was truly unharmed, launched into a lengthy speech about safety protocols and the importance of traveling in groups, which she endured patiently. It was nearly midnight by the time she finally made it to the tent she shared with two other actresses, Sarah and Margaret. They were already asleep, but they woke when she came in and demanded to hear the whole story. Zara obliged, keeping her voice low so as not to disturb the other nearby tents. She told them about the mountain lion, about Kade appearing like something out of a heroic ballad, about the ride back to camp. "How romantic," Sarah sighed. She was an incurable dreamer, forever falling in love with her various leading men, though the infatuations never seemed to last beyond the close of each production. A handsome cowboy saving you from certain death. "I did not say he was handsome," Zara protested. "You did not have to," Margaret said dryly. She was older, perhaps 30, and considerably more practical than Sarah. "It was written all over your face when you were talking to him by his horse. Are you going to see him again?" "He is coming for lunch tomorrow," Zara admitted. "I wanted to thank him properly." "Of course you did," Sarah said, grinning. "Oh, this is just like a story, the sophisticated actress and the rugged frontiersman. It is perfect." "It is nothing of the sort," Zara said firmly, even as she felt her cheeks warm. "He saved my life and I am grateful. That is all." But later, as she lay in her narrow cot listening to the night sounds of the desert outside the tent canvas, she thought about the solid strength of Kade's hand pulling her to her feet, the calm competence in his voice as he told her what to do, the way he had put himself between her and danger without hesitation. She thought about storm-gray eyes and the kind of stillness that came from truly knowing your place in the world. Sarah was wrong. This was not like a story. Stories were neat and predictable, with clear beginnings and satisfying endings. This was real life, messy and complicated, and Zara was only in Arizona for another 3 weeks before the company would pack up and return east. There was no room for romantic entanglements with cowboys, no matter how he had appeared exactly when she needed him most. She repeated that to herself several times before she finally fell asleep. The next morning dawned bright and clear, the desert heat already building even though it was barely past 8. Zara helped with the morning filming, a series of scenes set in front of the town saloon that required her to walk back and forth while delivering her lines about the pending arrival of outlaws. It was tedious work, made more so by Mr. Harrison's perfectionism, and the need to reset everything each time someone made the slightest mistake. By the time they broke for lunch, Zara was hot, tired, and questioning all her life choices that had led to her standing in the Arizona sun wearing a corset and 3 layers of petticoats. She retreated to her tent to change into something slightly cooler and to attempt to make herself presentable, though the heat defeated most of her efforts. Kade arrived precisely at noon, riding the same paint horse as the night before. He had cleaned up somewhat, wearing a shirt that looked newer than the one from yesterday and a hat that was not quite so battered. He dismounted as Zara came to meet him, and she was struck again by how different he seemed from the men she usually spent her time with. There was nothing performative about him, no artifice or pretense. He simply was solid and real in a way that made the elaborate world of theater and film feel suddenly very flimsy. "You came," she said, smiling. "Said I would," Kade replied. "Come on, then. I will introduce you to everyone, and then we can eat before the food is completely dried out by this heat." She led him into the camp, very aware of the curious stares they were attracting. Gerald looked openly skeptical when she introduced Kade as her rescuer, as if he could not quite believe that this quiet cowboy had accomplished something so dramatic. Mrs. Chen was more welcoming, immediately offering Kade water and asking after his ranch. The cook, a cheerful man named Tom, piled their plates high with beef stew and fresh bread, and Zara guided Kade to a spot in the shade of one of the wagons where they could eat in relative peace. "Sorry about all the attention," Zara said as they settled onto camp stools. "We are not very exciting people normally, so anything unusual becomes major news." "It is fine," Kade said, though he looked like he meant the opposite. They ate in silence for a few minutes, and Zara found herself searching for conversation topics. It had been a long time since she had felt so uncertain around another person. Usually, she could charm anyone, slip into whatever role the situation required and navigate social situations with ease. But something about Kade made her want to be genuine instead of performative, and she was discovering that genuine was much harder. "How long have you had your ranch?" she asked finally. 4 years. Saved up money working for other people, bought a small piece of land and some cattle. "It is not much, but it is mine. That must be satisfying, owning your own place." "It is," Kade said. He took a drink of water, then looked at her directly. "What about you? How did you become an actress?" "By accident, really," Zara said. "My father was a theater manager in New York. I grew up backstage, watching rehearsals and performances. When one of the actresses fell ill during a production, I was the same size and I knew all the lines from watching, so they put me in as a replacement. I was 14. I have been performing ever since." "You enjoy it?" "Most of the time," Zara said honestly. "I enjoy becoming different people, living in different stories. There is something magical about making an audience believe in something that is not real, but sometimes—" She paused, trying to find the right words. "Sometimes I wonder who I am when I am not playing a role. Does that make sense?" "I think so," Kade said. "Like you have spent so much time being other people, you are not sure who you are when it is just you." "Exactly," Zara said, surprised and pleased that he understood. "Out here, with all this space and quiet, it feels different. Like there is room to just be myself, except I am not entirely sure who that is anymore." "You figure it out," Kade said. "Takes time is all. The desert has a way of stripping things down to what is real. You spend enough time out here, you stop pretending." "Is that what happened to you?" "Something like that." Kade's expression turned distant for a moment. "I grew up in Missouri. My father wanted me to take over his store, sell dry goods and farm equipment for the rest of my life. But that was his dream, not mine. So I left when I was 17, came west and found this instead." He gestured at the vast landscape around them. "Found out who I actually was instead of who everyone expected me to be." "Do you ever regret it? Leaving?" "No," Kade said simply. "Do you ever regret becoming an actress?" "No," Zara said, echoing his certainty. "But I think I might regret not knowing anything else." They talked through the remainder of lunch and into the afternoon, the conversation flowing more easily as they grew more comfortable with each other. Kade told her about the challenges of running a small ranch, the constant work required to keep cattle healthy and fed, the delicate balance of surviving in country that could turn hostile without warning. Zara told him about life in the theater, the strange intimacy of a traveling company, the thrill of a performance going perfectly, and the disaster of one going wrong. Mr. Harrison eventually came to retrieve Zara for the afternoon's filming, looking somewhat annoyed that she had been away so long. Kade took that as his cue to leave, rising from his stool and settling his hat back on his head. "Thank you for lunch," he said. "Thank you for coming," Zara replied. She walked with him to where his horse was tied. "I enjoyed talking with you." "Same," Kade said. He untied the reins, then hesitated. "We are filming here for another 3 weeks," Zara said, "if you are ever in the area again." "I might be," Kade said, and there was something in his tone that suggested he might make sure of it. He rode off, and Zara returned to work, but she found her thoughts drifting throughout the afternoon. Mr. Harrison had to correct her twice when she missed her cues, and Gerald made a snide comment about actresses who could not focus on their craft. Zara ignored him and threw herself into the performance, but when they finally wrapped for the day, she felt restless and unsettled in a way she could not quite name. Over the next week, Kade came by the camp 3 more times. He never stayed long, always having work that needed doing at his ranch, but each visit stretched a little longer than the last. They would find quiet corners away from the bustle of filming and talk about everything and nothing. He told her about learning to break horses, about the first time he had seen the Grand Canyon, about a winter so harsh it had killed half his cattle and nearly broken him. She told him about performing Shakespeare in a snowstorm when the theater's heating had failed, about the time a fellow actor had forgotten his lines mid-scene, and she had improvised for 10 minutes straight, about her mother who had died when Zara was 12, and how she sometimes still heard her voice in quiet moments. The other actors and crew noticed, of course. Sarah teased her mercilessly, insisting this was the most romantic thing she had ever witnessed. Margaret was more cautious, reminding Zara that they would be leaving soon and long-distance attachments were rarely practical. Gerald, who had been making increasingly obvious advances toward Zara since the filming began, turned cold and dismissive. Zara tried not to care about any of it. She told herself she was simply making a friend, enjoying interesting conversations with someone whose world was completely different from her own. She told herself it did not matter that her heart beat faster every time she saw Kade riding toward the camp, that she found herself watching the horizon for him on days he did not come, that she lay awake at night remembering the way he looked at her when she said something that surprised him. She told herself a lot of things that were not quite true. 2 weeks into the filming, Mr. Harrison announced that they would be shooting some scenes in the actual desert, further from the camp, to capture specific landscape shots he wanted. It would require most of a day, and everyone would need to pack supplies for the journey. Zara mentioned this to Kade during his visit that afternoon, and he frowned. "How far out are you going?" he asked. Mr. Harrison said about 10 miles, toward those distinctive rock formations you can see from here. "That is rough country," Kade said. "Your director, does he know the area?" "He has a guide, someone from Bisbee who claims to know every inch of the desert." Kade's frown deepened. "Who?" "A man named Samuel Tucker." "Do you know him?" "I know of him," Kade said, his tone carefully neutral in a way that told Zara exactly what he thought. "He is more familiar with the bottom of whiskey bottles than he is with desert trails. Your director should find someone else." "I will mention it," Zara said, though she had little faith that Mr. Harrison would listen. The director was convinced of his own expertise in all matters and did not take kindly to suggestions. Sure enough, when Zara brought up Kade's concerns that evening, Mr. Harrison waved them away impatiently. "Mr. Tucker comes highly recommended by the hotel owner in Bisbee." "I am sure your cowboy friend means well, Miss Fleming, but I have been organizing expeditions and productions for 15 years. I know how to handle these matters." There was nothing Zara could do but accept this, but she felt uneasy as they prepared for the journey the following morning. The group was smaller than usual, just the key actors and essential crew members, along with Mr. Tucker as guide and 2 wagons carrying equipment and supplies. They set out just after dawn, the desert already beginning to warm under the climbing sun. The journey started well enough. Mr. Tucker led them along what seemed to be a reasonable trail, and the landscape was indeed spectacular, all red rock and sweeping vistas. Mr. Harrison was in excellent spirits, already planning the shots he wanted to capture. But as the morning wore on and the sun climbed higher, Zara began to notice troubling signs. Mr. Tucker kept consulting a hand-drawn map with increasing frequency, and twice he doubled back on their route, claiming he had wanted to avoid rough patches. By midday, they had reached the rock formations Mr. Harrison wanted, and everyone threw themselves into the work of setting up and filming. Zara performed her scenes in the blazing heat, walking across rocks and delivering lines about frontier hardship while actually experiencing a small taste of it. The corset felt like a torture device, and she could feel sweat running down her back under the heavy costume. They finished filming in the early afternoon, and that was when Mr. Tucker approached Mr. Harrison looking pale and worried. Zara could not hear the conversation, but she saw the director's face turn red with anger. Within minutes, the truth was out. Mr. Tucker had gotten them lost. He was not entirely sure how to get back to camp. The news sent a ripple of panic through the group. They had brought enough water for the day, but not enough to survive if they had to spend the night in the desert. The temperature was already over 90 degrees, and the sun was merciless. Mr. Harrison began shouting at Mr. Tucker, which accomplished nothing except making everyone more frightened. Zara looked around at the endless expanse of desert, trying to remember the route they had taken. But it all looked the same, rock and sand and scrub brush stretching in every direction. She thought about Kade, about the way he moved through this landscape with such certainty, reading signs in the earth that she could not even see. She wished desperately that he was here. As if summoned by her thoughts, a rider appeared in the distance. At first, Zara thought she was imagining it, the heat playing tricks on her eyes. But as the figure drew closer, she recognized the paint horse, the way the rider sat easy in the saddle. Relief flooded through her so powerfully it made her knees weak. Kade rode straight to where the group was clustered, taking in the situation with a quick glance. "You are lost," he said. It was not a question. "We took a wrong turn," Mr. Harrison said, trying to salvage some dignity. "We were just about to retrace our steps." "You have been going in circles for the last 2 hours," Kade said, pointing at the ground. "You passed this spot before. See the wagon tracks," he was right. Zara could see the marks now that he pointed them out, overlapping evidence of their confusion. "Can you guide us back?" she asked. Kade looked at her and something shifted in his expression. "That is why I am here. I knew Tucker was guiding you and I did not trust him to get you there and back safely. I have been following your trail since noon." "You followed us," Zara said. "For hours in this heat. Seemed like a good idea," Kade said simply. "Now let us get you back before someone gets seriously hurt by this sun." He took charge of the group with quiet authority, organizing the wagons and giving clear directions about the route. Mr. Harrison looked like he wanted to argue but was wise enough to keep his mouth shut. They set out again, this time with Kade in the lead, and within an hour, Zara began to recognize landmarks from their outward journey. She was riding in one of the wagons, squeezed between equipment boxes, but she kept her eyes on Kade ahead of them. He sat his horse like he was part of it, moving through the desert with the same natural ease as the wind. Sarah, sitting beside her, leaned over and whispered, "He followed us all day just to make sure you were safe." "That is not nothing, Zara." "He followed to make sure we were all safe," Zara corrected, but her heart was not in the argument. They reached camp just before sunset, exhausted and badly shaken by the close call. Mr. Harrison immediately fired Mr. Tucker and retreated to his tent, his confidence clearly rattled. The rest of the crew scattered to their various tasks, grateful to be back in familiar territory. Zara waited until most people had dispersed, then went to find Kade. He was tending to his horse, checking her hooves and offering her water. He looked up as Zara approached, his expression unreadable in the twilight. "You followed us," Zara said. "All day in the heat, because you were worried about a guide you did not trust." "Yes," Kade said. "That was a remarkable thing to do." "It was a necessary thing to do," Kade corrected. "Tucker is a fool and your director is too stubborn to admit when he is wrong. Someone needed to make sure you all got back safely." "So you appointed yourself," Zara said. She moved closer, studying his face. "Why? Why do you think?" Kade said quietly. The question hung between them, weighted with all the things they had been carefully not saying for the past 2 weeks. Zara felt her breath catch, suddenly aware of how close they were standing, how the fading light turned his gray eyes almost silver. "I think," she said slowly, "that you care about what happens to me, specifically to me, not just to the group." "You would be right," Kade said. "I have been trying not to. You are leaving in a week, going back east to your theater life. It does not make sense to care." "No," Zara agreed. "It does not make sense at all. But I do anyway," Kade said. "I think about you when I should be working. I ride 8 miles to your camp when I have a dozen things that need doing at my ranch. I follow film crews into the desert because the thought of something happening to you makes my chest hurt." Zara reached up and touched his face, her fingers brushing along his jaw. "I think about you too," she said. "All the time. I perform my scenes and half my mind is wondering if you will visit that day. I lie awake at night and remember conversations we had. Sarah says I am hopeless. Margaret says I am being impractical. They are both probably right." "Probably," Kade agreed. His hand came up to cover hers where it rested against his face. "What do we do about it?" "I have no idea," Zara said honestly. "I have played dozens of love stories, but I have never actually been in one. I do not know how this works in real life." "Neither do I," Kade admitted, "but I would like to find out if you would." "Yes," Zara said. "I would like that very much." He kissed her then, soft and careful, like she was something precious he was afraid of breaking. Zara leaned into it, her free hand coming up to grip his shirt, anchoring herself to this moment. When they finally pulled apart, she was smiling, and she could see the same expression reflected on his face. "I still have to leave in a week," she said. "The filming ends and the company goes back to New York." "I know," Kade said, "and you have your ranch here. Your life is in Arizona." "I know that too." "So we have 1 week," Zara said. "That is not much time." "No," Kade agreed, "but it is more than nothing. And I am not ready to let this go without seeing where it leads." "Are you?" "No," Zara said. "I am not ready either." They stood there in the gathering darkness, holding onto each other, and Zara felt something settle in her chest. It was not a solution to the impossible logistics of their situation, but it was a beginning. And sometimes, she thought, beginnings were enough. The next week passed in a strange blur of intensity and normalcy. During the days, Zara threw herself into the filming, performing her scenes with a focus that earned praise from Mr. Harrison. But every spare moment, every break between setups, every evening after the work was done, she spent with Kade. He took her riding in the early mornings before the heat became unbearable, teaching her how to read the desert, how to spot the signs of water and wildlife and weather. She was a terrible rider, bouncing awkwardly in the saddle and making his horse nervous with her uncertainty. But Kade was patient. He showed her how to move with the animal instead of against it, how to hold the reins properly, how to communicate with pressure and release rather than force. They talked endlessly, sharing stories and secrets and dreams. Kade told her about the future he wanted for his ranch, expanding gradually, building something that would last. Zara told him about the roles she wanted to play, the stories she wanted to bring to life on stage. She confessed her fear that she was getting too old for ingenue parts, that soon she would be relegated to playing mothers and maiden aunts. He told her about the isolation of ranch life, the long stretches without seeing another person, the way silence could be both peaceful and lonely. One evening, he brought her to a high point overlooking the desert, and they watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple and deep crimson. Zara leaned against his shoulder, his arm wrapped around her waist, and felt more at peace than she could remember being in years. "This place has changed me," she said quietly. "Or maybe it has just shown me something about myself I did not know was there." "What is that?" Kade asked. "That I was tired of performing," Zara said. "Not acting necessarily, but performing life. Always being what people expected, playing the role of the sophisticated actress, the charming companion, the professional artist. Out here, with you, I feel like I can just be Zara. Whoever that is." "I like whoever that is," Kade said. "She is brave and curious and says what she thinks. She gets scared but does not let it stop her. She cares about things deeply, even when it would be easier not to." "You see all that?" Zara asked, surprised. "I see you," Kade said simply. "The real you, not a performance, and you are better than any role you could play." Zara turned to look at him, her heart suddenly so full it hurt. "I love you," she said. The words surprised her as much as they clearly surprised him, but once they were out, she knew they were true. "I know it has only been 3 weeks. I know this is impractical and probably foolish, but I love you. You are more real than any role I have ever played, and being with you makes me more real too." Kade's expression softened into something that took Zara's breath away. "I love you too," he said. "I think I have since the moment I saw you standing up to that mountain lion, scared but not broken. You grabbed onto something in me that night, and I have not been able to shake it loose. Do not want to, honestly." They kissed as the sun finally dipped below the horizon, and Zara thought this would have been the perfect ending to a story. The moment where the curtain fell and the audience applauded. But this was not a story, and there was no neat ending waiting for them. Just the complicated reality of two people from different worlds who had somehow found each other and did not want to let go. The question of what to do about that reality came to a head 2 days before the company was scheduled to leave. Zara had been avoiding thinking about it, focusing on the present moments with Kade instead of the impossible future. But Margaret finally cornered her in their tent and forced the conversation. "Have you thought about what happens when we leave?" Margaret asked bluntly. "Yes and no," Zara admitted. "Mostly no." "That is not a strategy, Zara. That is avoidance." "I know," Zara said miserably. She sat down on her cot, suddenly exhausted. "I know we cannot keep doing this once the company leaves. Long-distance attachments do not work, especially when one person is constantly traveling with a theater company. But I cannot imagine saying goodbye to him either." "So do not," Margaret said. "What? Do not say goodbye. Stay here." Zara stared at her. "Stay here in Arizona." "Margaret, my whole life is in New York. My career, my friends, my home." "Your career is wherever you perform," Margaret said practically. "Your friends will miss you but survive. And your home is a boarding house room that you barely spend time in anyway because you are always on tour. What is actually keeping you in New York besides habit?" "That is not fair," Zara said, but even as she said it, she was not sure Margaret was wrong. "I am not saying it would be easy," Margaret continued. "But I have watched you these past 3 weeks, and you are happier than I have ever seen you. More yourself. Is that worth walking away from? Even if I wanted to stay, what would I do here?" There are no theaters, no companies, no roles to play. Then maybe you find something else, Margaret said. Or maybe you create something new. I hear Bisbee is a growing town. Who is to say they would not support a theater if someone passionate enough started one? The idea was absurd. And yet, as Zara sat there thinking about it, it did not feel entirely impossible. She had managed productions before, had helped her father with the business side of theater. She had savings, not a fortune but enough to start small. And the thought of waking up every morning in this vast, beautiful landscape, of building a life with Kade instead of watching it disappear in her rearview mirror, made something in her chest ache with longing. I need to think, Zara said finally. Do not think too long, Margaret advised. We leave the day after tomorrow. That evening, Zara asked Kade to take her to his ranch. She had heard him talk about it, but she had never actually seen it, and she realized suddenly that this mattered. If she was even considering Margaret's suggestion, she needed to understand what she would be choosing. They rode out in the late afternoon, the worst of the heat finally breaking as the sun angled toward the horizon. Kade's ranch was modest, a small house and barn surrounded by split-rail fencing with several hundred acres of grazing land stretching out beyond. It was simple and practical, built for function rather than beauty, but there was something appealing about its solid reality. This is it, Kade said, dismounting and helping her down. Not much compared to the grand houses in New York, I imagine. It is wonderful, Zara said honestly. She could see the care in the neat fences, the well-maintained barn, the small garden beside the house where vegetables grew in tidy rows. You built all this yourself. Most of it, Kade said. The house was here when I bought the land, but I expanded the barn and put in the fencing. Still have plans for more when I can afford it. He showed her around, pointing out the corral where he broke horses, the pasture where his small herd of cattle grazed, the creek that provided reliable water. Zara tried to imagine herself here, tried to picture what her days would look like in this quiet, isolated place. It was so different from the bustling energy of New York, the constant motion of theater life. But as she stood in Kade's small living room, looking at the simple furniture and the books on rough-hewn shelves, she found she could imagine it. More than imagine it, she wanted it. Kade, she said slowly, what if I did not leave with the company? He went very still. What do you mean? I mean, what if I stayed here, in Arizona? We could see if this is real, if it lasts beyond 3 weeks in unusual circumstances. We could try to build something together. Zara. Kade crossed the room to stand in front of her, his expression serious. I would love nothing more than for you to stay, but I will not let you give up your life for me. Your career, your acting, that is part of who you are. I do not want you to wake up in a year and resent me for what you gave up. What if I am not giving it up? Zara said. What if I am just changing how I do it? Margaret pointed out that Bisbee is growing. Maybe it could support a theater. Maybe I could start something here, something that belongs to me in a way the traveling company never has. That is a big maybe, Kade said carefully, and a huge risk. I know, Zara said, but you took a risk when you left Missouri and came west. You chose the life you wanted instead of the one everyone expected from you. Maybe it is my turn to do the same. This is different. I was 17 and had nothing to lose. You have an established career, a reputation. And I am 23 and tired of always being on the move, always performing for other people's visions, Zara said. She took his hands, gripping them tightly. I love acting, I do. But these past few weeks, I have been happier than I have been in years. And it is not just you, though you are a large part of it. It is this place, this freedom to just be myself. I want to see what it would be like to build a life here. With you, yes, but also for myself. Kade studied her face for a long moment. "You are serious about this?" "Completely serious," Zara said. "I know it is fast, I know it is crazy, but I also know that I will regret it for the rest of my life if I get on that train and never find out what we could have been." "Then stay," Kade said. His voice was rough with emotion. "Stay, and we will figure it out together. I do not know anything about theater, but I know hard work and I know how to build something from nothing. If you want to start a theater in Bisbee, I will help you make it happen." "You would do that?" Zara asked. "I would do anything for you," Kade said simply. "I love you, Zara. I want you to have the life you deserve, whatever that looks like." Zara kissed him then, pouring everything she felt into it, all the hope and fear and wild joy of choosing something entirely new. When they finally broke apart, she was crying and laughing at the same time. "I am staying," she said. "I am actually staying." "You are staying," Kade confirmed, grinning. Then his expression turned more serious. "Are you sure? Really sure? I do not want you to wake up tomorrow and realize you made this decision in a romantic moment." "I am sure," Zara said. "I will probably be terrified tomorrow and the day after that and for many days to come. But I am sure this is what I want." They stayed at the ranch until well after dark, planning and dreaming and slowly coming to terms with what Zara's decision meant. She would need to withdraw from the company, which meant a difficult conversation with Mr. Harrison. She would need to find somewhere to live while she established herself, either in Bisbee or here at the ranch if she and Kade decided that was appropriate. She would need to research what it would take to start a theater, to gauge interest in the community, to find or build a suitable space. It was overwhelming when she thought about it all at once. But Kade was right that she knew how to work hard, and she had spent her whole life in theater. She knew the business, knew what made a production succeed or fail, and she had something else now too. She had a reason to stay, and a partner who believed in her, and a whole new world to explore. When Kade finally took her back to camp, it was nearly midnight. They said goodnight with another long kiss, and Zara floated into her tent feeling like she had just stepped off a stage after the performance of a lifetime. Sarah and Margaret were both awake, clearly having waited up for her. "You are staying, are you not?" Sarah said immediately, reading Zara's expression. "I am staying," Zara confirmed. Sarah squealed and threw her arms around Zara. "Oh, this is the most romantic thing that has ever happened to anyone. You are giving up everything for love." "I am not giving up anything," Zara corrected gently. "I am choosing something different. There is a distinction." "I am glad," Margaret said. "You deserve to be happy, Zara, and you have been happier here than I have ever seen you." The next morning, Zara asked for a private meeting with Mr. Harrison. The director was in the middle of overseeing the packing of equipment, checking off items on a long list. He looked up impatiently when she entered his tent. "Miss Fleming, what can I do for you? I am rather busy preparing for our departure." "That is what I need to talk to you about," Zara said. "I will not be leaving with the company." Mr. Harrison's pen stopped moving. "I beg your pardon. I have decided to stay in Arizona," Zara said. "I know this is sudden and I apologize for the short notice, but I wanted to tell you directly rather than simply disappearing." "This is about that cowboy," Mr. Harrison said flatly. "You are throwing away your career for a man you have known for 3 weeks." "I am not throwing away my career," Zara said, keeping her voice level despite his tone. "I am relocating it. I plan to establish a theater here in Bisbee. And yes, Kade is part of my decision, but he is not the whole reason." "You are making a terrible mistake," Mr. Harrison said. "Actresses like you are not uncommon, Miss Fleming. Do you know how quickly you will be replaced in the company? How fast audiences will forget you once you are no longer performing?" His words stung, but Zara held her ground. "Perhaps. But I would rather take that risk than spend the rest of my life wondering what I missed by leaving." "You are being a fool," Mr. Harrison said coldly. "But I suppose that is your right. I will have your final wages calculated. Good day, Miss Fleming." He turned back to his list, effectively dismissing her. Zara left the tent feeling shaken but resolute. The other company members were more supportive, though most seemed to think she was crazy. Gerald made a few cutting remarks about how actresses who thought with their hearts instead of their heads rarely lasted long in the business. Sarah cried and made Zara promise to write. Margaret pulled her aside and pressed a roll of bills into her hand. "A loan," Margaret said when Zara tried to refuse. "To help you get started, pay me back when your theater is successful." "If it is successful," Zara corrected. "When," Margaret said firmly. "You are talented and driven, Zara. You will make this work." The company left the next morning, a long train of wagons and horses heading back toward the nearest rail station. Zara stood beside Kade and watched them go, feeling a strange mixture of relief and terror. When the last wagon disappeared from view, she turned to Kade. "I really did it," she said. "I am really staying." "You really did," Kade agreed. He put his arm around her shoulders. "How do you feel?" "Terrified," Zara admitted, "but also excited. Is that normal?" "I felt the same way when I bought this ranch," Kade said. "It is normal when you are starting something new." They spent that first day making practical plans. Kade took Zara into Bisbee, where she rented a small room above the general store. It was modest but clean, with a window overlooking the main street. She would stay there until she and Kade were married, which they both agreed should wait at least a few months. Even in frontier towns, propriety mattered, and Zara did not want to damage her reputation before she had even begun establishing herself in the community. Over the next several weeks, Zara threw herself into researching the possibility of a theater. She talked to the mayor, to business owners, to anyone who would listen about the cultural value of live performance. The responses were mixed. Some people were enthusiastic, seeing a theater as a sign of progress and civilization. Others were skeptical, questioning whether a mining town needed such frivolities. But Zara was persistent. She started small, organizing a reading of scenes from popular plays in the community hall. Nearly 50 people attended, far more than she had dared hope, and the positive response encouraged her to keep going. She found a space, an old warehouse that had been used for storage, and negotiated a lease with the owner. Kade helped her clean it out and begin converting it into something resembling a performance space. The work was exhausting and often frustrating. There were days when Zara questioned her decision, when the enormity of what she was trying to accomplish felt overwhelming. But Kade was there through all of it, steady and supportive, helping with the physical labor and listening when she needed to talk through problems. And slowly, steadily, the theater began to take shape. 6 months after Zara had stayed in Arizona, she and Kade were married in a simple ceremony at the small church in Bisbee. Margaret had written to say she could not make the journey, but sent her love and congratulations. Sarah had sent a telegram that was mostly exclamation points. Zara wore a simple white dress, not the elaborate costume she would have worn on stage, and Kade wore his best shirt and a new hat. They spoke their vows in front of a small gathering of friends they had made in the community, and Zara felt more certain of this performance than any she had ever given. After the wedding, Zara moved to the ranch. She had worried about the isolation, about the distance from town and the theater she was trying to build. But she found she loved it. She loved waking up next to Kade, loved the quiet mornings and the spectacular sunsets, loved learning the rhythms of ranch life. She was not a natural rancher, but she learned to help with the animals, to tend the garden, to cook meals that did not come from a restaurant or boarding house kitchen. She still went into Bisbee several times a week to work on the theater. By the end of that first year, she had assembled a small company of local performers and staged their first full production, a comedy that had the audience laughing and applauding. It was not Broadway or even a proper regional theater, but it was hers, built from nothing through sheer determination and will. The theater grew slowly but steadily. Zara directed most of the productions and performed in many of them, finding she enjoyed the creative control of running her own company. They did not make much money, but they made enough to sustain themselves and gradually improve the space. The community embraced the theater as something special, something that set Bisbee apart from other mining towns. 2 years after Zara had stayed in Arizona, she discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with a mixture of joy and uncertainty. She had never been certain she wanted children, had always been too focused on her career to seriously consider it. But as her belly grew and she felt the baby moving inside her, she found herself excited for this new role. Their son was born on a warm spring morning, arriving with relative ease after a labor that lasted only 6 hours. They named him James, after Kade's grandfather, and Zara fell instantly and completely in love. She had thought she understood love before, had felt it for Kade, for her work, for the life they had built. But this was different, overwhelming in its intensity. Being a mother changed Zara in ways she had not anticipated. She had to cut back on her work at the theater, delegating more to the other company members. She spent long hours nursing James, watching his tiny face as he slept, marveling at the perfection of his small fingers and toes. Kade was a devoted father, taking James out to see the horses and cattle even when he was too young to understand what he was seeing. "He looks like you," Kade said one evening as they sat on the porch, James sleeping in Zara's arms. "He looks like both of us," Zara corrected. "He has your eyes." "And your determination," Kade said, grinning. "Have you noticed how he refuses to sleep unless he is ready? Cannot force him into it." "That is not determination, that is stubbornness," Zara said, but she was smiling. Life settled into a new rhythm. The ranch prospered, Kade's careful management paying off in larger herds and better profits. The theater continued to thrive, becoming an established part of Bisbee's cultural life. Zara balanced motherhood with her work, sometimes bringing James to rehearsals and letting the other actors coo over him. When James was 2, Zara found herself pregnant again. This time she knew what to expect, was less anxious and more confident. Their daughter was born in the deep winter, a cold snap that had Kade worried about keeping the house warm enough. They named her Alice, and she was as different from her brother as could be. Where James had been relatively calm, Alice was intense and demanding, crying loudly when she wanted something and not easily soothed. "She has your dramatic flair," Kade teased one night as Alice screamed her displeasure at being put to bed. "And your stubbornness," Zara shot back, but she was laughing. The years passed, marked by the steady growth of their family and their work. James grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved the ranch and spent hours following his father around, learning about cattle and horses. Alice was more like Zara, creative and theatrical, always putting on performances for whoever would watch. When James was 10 and Alice was 8, Zara expanded the theater, building an addition that included proper backstage space and better seating. The funding came partly from profits and partly from community donations, proof that the theater had become a valued institution. She hired a school teacher who had training in music to help teach classes for young people interested in performance, ensuring the next generation would have opportunities she had had to seek out on her own. Kade's ranch had grown as well. He now ran several hundred head of cattle and had hired 2 ranch hands to help with the work. He still broke horses, a skill that was always in demand, and had earned a reputation as one of the best horsemen in the territory. He was respected in the community, known as fair and honest in his dealings. One evening, when they had been married for 15 years, Zara and Kade sat on their porch watching the sunset. James and Alice were inside doing homework, their voices occasionally floating out through the open window. Kade reached over and took Zara's hand, lacing their fingers together. "You ever regret it?" he asked. "Staying here instead of continuing with your career in New York?" "Never," Zara said without hesitation. "Not once." "Do you regret asking me to stay?" "I did not ask," Kade reminded her. "You decided on your own." "You did not exactly discourage me," Zara said, smiling. "No," Kade admitted. "I was too selfish for that, but I worried, especially in those first few years, that you would resent what you had given up." "I did not give anything up," Zara said. "I traded one kind of life for another. And this one, this life with you and the children and the theater I built, it is better than anything I could have imagined back then." "The theater means that much to you?" Kade asked. "It does," Zara said. "Because it is mine in a way nothing in New York ever was. I built it from nothing, made it something important to this community. Every production, every actor I train, every audience member who leaves smiling, that is success in a way that performing someone else's vision never was." "You are remarkable," Kade said. "You know that. I learned from the best," Zara said. "You showed me what it meant to build something real, something lasting. You chose this life deliberately and you made it into something meaningful. You taught me that success is not about fame or recognition. It is about doing work you believe in with people you love." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun finally disappeared and the stars began to emerge. From inside, Alice started singing something, her voice clear and sweet, and James joined in with enthusiastic if slightly off-key support. Zara leaned against Kade's shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, and thought about the long, strange journey that had brought her here. She had come to Arizona as an actress playing at Frontier Life, performing in a film that had probably been forgotten before it was even released. She had nearly been killed by a mountain lion, had been saved by a cowboy who had appeared like something out of one of her scripts, and had made the most impulsive decision of her life in choosing to stay. And out of that impulsive decision had come everything that mattered. A marriage built on mutual respect and genuine love. 2 children who were healthy and happy. A theater that served the community and fulfilled her creative needs. A home in this harsh, beautiful landscape that had taught her who she really was beneath all the roles she had played. "I love you," she said to Kade. "I do not say it enough." "You say it all the time," Kade replied. "Not always with words, but I hear it. In the way you look at me, the way you support my work, the way you have built a life here with me, I hear it every day." "I love you with words too," Zara insisted. "You are more real than any role I have ever played. Being with you, being myself with you, that is the best performance of my life. Except it is not a performance at all. It is just real." "Just real," Kade echoed. "I like that." They stayed on the porch until the children called them in for dinner, and even then, Kade kept hold of Zara's hand as they walked inside together. The house smelled like the stew Zara had started that morning, and the table was already set, Alice and James arguing good-naturedly about whose turn it was to say grace. This was Zara's life now. Real and messy and imperfect and absolutely precious. She had been an actress, and in many ways she still was, directing and performing in her theater several times a week. But she was also a wife and mother, a rancher by marriage if not by talent, a business owner and community member. She was all these things at once, no longer trying to figure out who she was beneath the roles, but understanding that she was all of it, the sum of every choice and experience. As they sat down to dinner, Alice immediately launched into a story about something that had happened at school, gesturing dramatically with her hands. James rolled his eyes but listened patiently, occasionally correcting details. Kade served the stew, making sure everyone had enough. And Zara looked around the table at her family, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. "You all right?" Kade asked quietly, noticing her expression. "More than all right," Zara said. "I am happy." "Good," Kade said, and smiled at her with so much love it took her breath away even after 15 years. They ate dinner together, talking and laughing as the desert night settled around their small house. Outside, the stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns, and somewhere in the distance a coyote called. The mountain lion that had nearly killed Zara all those years ago was long gone, but others roamed the hills, hunting and living their wild lives. But inside the ranch house, there was light and warmth and love, built carefully over years of hard work and deliberate choices. Zara had come to the desert to play at being a frontier woman, and had stayed to become one for real. She had found in the harsh landscape and the quiet cowboy something she had not even known she was looking for, something that theater and performance could never provide. She had found herself, finally and completely. And she had found a love that was more real than any story, more true than any role, more lasting than applause or fame or recognition. She had found home. Years continued to pass, each one adding its own texture to the life Zara and Kade had built. James grew into a young man who was as comfortable on horseback as his father, helping manage the ranch with quiet competence. Alice, true to her dramatic nature, threw herself into theater with a passion that sometimes alarmed and always delighted Zara. She performed in nearly every production, her talent raw but genuine. When James turned 18, he surprised everyone by announcing he wanted to go to college in California to study agriculture and modern ranching techniques. It was not common for ranch kids to pursue higher education, but Kade and Zara supported his decision, proud of his ambition. The day they put him on the train, Zara cried despite her best efforts not to, and Kade held her close as they watched their son disappear toward his future. Alice was 16 then, already planning her own future in theater. She talked constantly about New York and the great stages there, and Zara listened with a mixture of pride and sadness. She recognized her younger self in Alice's dreams and determination, but she also knew how hard that life could be. "You want me to stay here?" Alice asked one evening as they worked together on costumes for the next production. "I can feel you worrying, Mama. Do you think I should stay in Bisbee like you did?" "I want you to make the choice that is right for you," Zara said carefully. "Not the choice you think I want or that your father wants, but what you actually want for yourself." "I want to see what is out there," Alice said. "I love the theater here and I love this town, but I want to know if I am good enough for bigger stages." "Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense," Zara said. "I felt the same way when I was young, and I do not regret the years I spent traveling and performing before I came here. Those experiences made me who I am." "But you are worried I will leave and never come back," Alice said. "A little," Zara admitted. "But that is my fear to manage, not yours. You need to follow your own path, Alice, and wherever it takes you, your father and I will support you." When Alice graduated from school at 18, she did go to New York, armed with letters of introduction from Zara to the few theater contacts she still maintained. Zara helped her pack, passing on advice about auditions and rejection, and the importance of finding people you could trust in a city that was not always kind to young actresses. The day Alice left was harder than James's departure had been. Perhaps because Alice was their youngest, or because her dreams so closely mirrored what Zara's had once been, the goodbye felt heavier. Kade said little, but Zara could see the sadness in his eyes as he hugged their daughter farewell. "Now what?" Zara asked that night as they lay in bed, the house feeling too quiet and empty. "Now we remember that we raised two good humans who are going out to live their own lives," Kade said. "That was always the plan." "I know," Zara said, "but I miss them already." "Me too," Kade admitted. "But we will figure out this next part, just like we figured out everything else." And they did. Zara poured more energy into the theater, expanding the educational programs and starting a touring company that performed in smaller towns around Arizona. Kade focused on improving the ranch, implementing some of the modern techniques James wrote about in his letters. They traveled more than they had when the children were young, taking a trip to San Francisco and another to Denver. James returned after 4 years with a degree and a fiancée, a practical woman named Helen who had grown up on a ranch in California. They married in Bisbee, and Zara cried again, this time happy tears as she watched her son speak his vows with the same steady certainty that had characterized his whole life. James and Helen settled on the ranch, building a small house on the property, and began the work of taking over the day-to-day management from Kade. Alice stayed in New York for nearly 6 years, performing in various productions and building her career. She wrote long letters describing auditions and roles, successes and failures, the strange, intense life of working theater. Then, when she was 24, she came home for a visit and announced she was thinking of staying. "I thought you loved New York," Zara said, trying not to sound too hopeful. "I do," Alice said, "but I am also tired. It is exhausting, Mama, always competing, always proving yourself, always wondering when the next job will come. And I have been thinking about what you built here, how you created something that lasts instead of just jumping from role to role. I think I might want to try that." "The theater is yours if you want it," Zara said. "I have been running it for almost 30 years. I would be happy to have help, and even happier to eventually hand it over to someone I know will care for it the way I have." Alice did stay, and slowly she and Zara transitioned the theater's leadership. Alice brought fresh ideas and new energy, while Zara provided experience and community connections. They made a good team, mother and daughter working together to ensure the theater would continue to thrive. By the time Zara turned 50, her life had taken on a shape she could never have predicted in her days as a traveling actress. She performed less frequently now, leaving the stage mostly to younger actors, but she still directed and taught. The theater was in good hands with Alice, and Zara found she enjoyed the role of advisor and mentor more than she had expected. The ranch was thriving under James's management, and he and Helen had given Zara and Kade 3 grandchildren who filled the house with noise and laughter when they visited. Zara discovered that being a grandmother was delightful in ways that were completely different from motherhood. All the joy with slightly less constant responsibility. One evening, Zara and Kade took a ride out to the place where he had first brought her all those years ago, the high point overlooking the desert. They were older now, with gray in their hair and lines on their faces, but they still fit together the same way they always had. "Do you remember the first time we came here?" Zara asked as they watched the sunset. "I remember everything about those first few weeks," Kade said. "Every conversation, every moment. I knew I was falling in love with you and it scared me half to death." "Me too," Zara said. I kept telling myself it was just infatuation, that it would not last once the newness wore off. I was so wrong. It never wore off, Kade agreed. You still make my heart beat faster when you walk into a room. Even now that I am old and creaky, Zara teased. You are not old, Kade said. And I am older than you, so if you are creaky, what does that make me? Distinguished, Zara said. You are distinguished. Kade laughed, the sound warm and familiar. They sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned from orange to purple to deep blue, the first stars emerging. Zara thought about the long journey that had brought her here, all the choices and chances and moments of courage that had built this life. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? Kade asked. For saving me from that mountain lion. For following the film crew when you did not trust the guide. For supporting my crazy idea to start a theater. For building this life with me. For all of it. You saved yourself, Kade said. I just happened to be there, but I am grateful for it every single day. You took a chance on me, on this place, on a life you could not have predicted. You gave up everything you knew for something completely uncertain. I did not give up anything, Zara said, echoing words she had spoken many times over the years. I chose something better. I chose you, and the theater, and Arizona, and all of it. Best decision I ever made. Best decision I ever made was riding through that particular patch of desert at that particular time, Kade said. Luckiest day of my life. Mine too, Zara said. Even though I thought I was going to die. You did not die, Kade said. You lived. We both did. And it has been a good life, Zara. Better than I ever hoped for. It has, Zara agreed. She leaned against his shoulder, feeling the same sense of rightness she had felt since the very beginning. You know what I realized recently? I spent years as an actress trying to find the truth in fictional stories, trying to make audiences believe in something that was not real. But the most true thing I ever did was stop performing and just live. This life with you, it is the most honest thing I have ever been part of. You are still performing, Kade pointed out. You direct at the theater. You taught Alice everything she knows. That is different, Zara said. That is sharing stories, helping people connect to something larger than themselves. But it is not about hiding who I am anymore. For years, I thought I had to be whatever role required. Out here with you, I learned I could just be Zara. Turns out that was enough. More than enough, Kade said. You are everything. They rode back to the ranch as the stars filled the sky, the desert alive with night sounds around them. The house was lit with warm lamplight, and through the window, Zara could see Alice inside, probably working on production plans. James and Helen's house was dark, their children already in bed. This was her legacy, Zara thought as they put the horses away and walked hand in hand toward their home. Not performances that would be forgotten, not reviews in newspapers, not applause from anonymous audiences. Her legacy was the theater she had built and the daughter who would carry it forward. It was the family she and Kade had created together, the grandchildren who would grow up knowing love and stability. It was the life they had constructed through sheer determination and faith in each other. Inside, Alice had made tea and was waiting for them. I was starting to worry, she said. You were gone a long time. Just taking a ride, Zara said. Remembering what? Alice asked. How your mother saved my life by being brave enough to stay, Kade said. You saved my life, Zara corrected. Literally and figuratively. You saved each other, Alice said. That is what you always told James and me. That love is not one person rescuing the other. It is both people choosing to build something together. Did we say that? Zara asked, pleased. Many times, Alice said. Usually when we were complaining about chores or homework. You would tell us that anything worth having required work and commitment. That love was a choice you made every day, not just a feeling that happened to you. That is true, Kade said. Your mother chose to stay, and I chose to support her dreams. We keep choosing each other, even when it would be easier not to." They sat together in the kitchen, drinking tea and talking about the upcoming production and the grandchildren and plans for the ranch. It was an ordinary evening, comfortable and familiar, and Zara treasured it for exactly that reason. After so many years of seeking drama and excitement, she had learned that the quiet moments were often the most precious. When they finally went to bed, Zara lay beside Kade in the darkness, listening to his steady breathing. She thought about the young woman she had been, walking back to camp through the desert with her heavy skirts and her head full of scripts and performances. That woman had been so certain she knew who she was and what she wanted. And then a mountain lion had screamed, and a cowboy had appeared, and everything had changed. Zara had found in the Arizona desert something she had been missing without knowing it. She had found authenticity, a life that was hers in every sense, built on choices she had made for herself rather than for audiences or directors or anyone else's expectations. She had found love with a man who saw her completely, who had never asked her to be anything other than exactly who she was. And together, they had built something that would last long after they were gone, leaving marks on the world that mattered. Zara fell asleep thinking about that first night, riding double on Kade's horse through the desert darkness, holding on to him and not yet knowing she had just met the man she would spend her life with. If she could go back and tell that frightened young woman what was coming, would she believe it? Would she understand how much courage it would take to choose this path, and how worth it the choice would be? Probably not, Zara thought as sleep finally claimed her. But that was all right. Some things you had to live to understand, some truths you had to discover for yourself. And she had discovered hers, out here in the wild, beautiful desert, in the arms of a man who had saved her life, and then helped her build a new one. Years continued their steady march, bringing changes both large and small. James and Helen expanded the ranch further, and their children grew into capable helpers. Alice married a schoolteacher from Bisbee, a quiet man who loved theater despite having no talent for performing, and they had 2 daughters who showed early signs of inheriting their mother's dramatic flair. Zara stepped back more and more from the daily operations of the theater, becoming more of a guiding presence than an active manager. She still taught occasionally, working with young actors who reminded her of herself, passing on decades of hard-won knowledge. She published a memoir of her time building the theater, not expecting much of an audience but wanting to document the story for Alice and her grandchildren. To her surprise, the book found readers, particularly among women interested in frontier life and the arts. She received letters from across the country, from actresses and directors, and ordinary women who had been inspired by her story of leaving behind a traditional career to build something new. It was gratifying in a way that performance had never quite been, this sense of connecting with people through honest sharing rather than artifice. Kade slowed down as well, turning more of the ranch work over to James while he focused on training horses, which had always been his first love. He was in his 70s now, his hair completely silver and his movements slower than they had once been, but he still sat a horse like he was part of it. Zara loved watching him work, the way he communicated with animals through patience and understanding rather than force. One spring morning, when Zara was 72 and Kade was 75, they sat on their porch drinking coffee and watching the sunrise. It was something they did almost every morning now, this quiet ritual of welcoming the day together. Kade reached over and took her hand, his grip still strong despite the arthritis that sometimes plagued his fingers. "I have been thinking," he said. "About what?" Zara asked. About that first day when I saw you facing down that mountain lion. Do you remember what you were wearing?" "That ridiculous costume," Zara said, laughing. 20 pounds of fabric and a corset that was trying to kill me. I must have looked absurd." "You looked terrified but brave," Kade said. "You were not running or screaming. You were just standing there, facing it down, even though I could see you were scared. That was when I knew." "Knew what?" "That you were special, that you were worth knowing. I did not know I would fall in love with you, not yet, but I knew you were different from anyone I had ever met." "I thought I was going to die," Zara said. "And then you appeared like something out of a story, firing your rifle and putting yourself between me and danger. I thought you were the bravest person I had ever seen." "I was just doing what needed doing," Kade said. "Exactly," Zara said. "That is what I came to love about you. You do not make a big deal out of anything. You just do what needs doing, whether it is saving someone from a mountain lion or building a ranch or supporting your wife's dream of starting a theater in the middle of nowhere." "It was not nowhere," Kade said. "It was Bisbee, and your theater made it somewhere worth being." They sat in comfortable silence, watching as the sky lightened and the desert came alive with morning sounds. Somewhere in the distance, cattle were lowing, and closer by, birds were singing their dawn chorus. It was a peaceful morning, ordinary in the best way. "You have any regrets?" Zara asked. "Looking back on everything." "Only that I did not have more time," Kade said. "But that is greedy, I suppose. We have had nearly 50 years together. That is more than most people get." 50 years, Zara said, marveling at it. "Half a century. It has gone so fast." "And so slow," Kade said. "Some of those early years, building the theater and establishing the ranch, those felt like they lasted forever. But then the children grew up in what felt like a blink." "And now we are old," Zara said. "Now we are old," Kade agreed. "But we are still here, still together, still watching sunrises from this porch. I consider that a victory." "A victory," Zara echoed, liking the word. "Yes, we won. We built something real that lasted, and we did it together. That is better than any role I ever played, better than any story I could have written." "You were more real than any role you played," Kade said, echoing words she had spoken to him so long ago. "You still are. The most real, most true person I have ever known." Zara felt tears prick her eyes. Even after all these years, he could still make her heart full with just a few words. "I love you," she said, "more than I can express." "I know," Kade said. "I love you too, always have, always will." They finished their coffee as the sun cleared the horizon, painting everything in shades of gold. Then Kade stood, offering his hand to help Zara up, and together they walked out into their day, into the life they had built together, ready for whatever came next. The years that followed were gentle ones. Kade's health began to fail slowly, nothing dramatic but a gradual diminishing that they both recognized. He developed a cough that would not go away, and the doctor in Bisbee suggested he might have been affected by years of dust and hard living. Kade accepted this news with his typical stoicism, adjusting his activities, but not abandoning them entirely. Zara stayed close to him, cutting back even further on her theater work to spend more time at the ranch. They took walks together in the mornings, shorter than they used to be, but still meaningful. They reminisced about their life together, telling and retelling favorite stories, laughing over memories that had only grown better with time. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching yet another sunset, Kade turned to Zara and said, "I want you to know something." "What?" Zara asked. "That if I could do it all over again, I would not change a single thing. Every choice, every moment, every challenge, it was all worth it because it brought me here. With you." "Kade," Zara said, her throat tight with emotion. "I mean it," he continued. "You made my life bigger and richer than I ever imagined it could be. You challenged me and supported me and loved me. You gave me children and grandchildren and more happiness than any one person deserves. I want you to know that, to really understand it. My life was good before you, but it was great after, and that is because of you." "My life was the same," Zara said. "I was performing before, playing at living. With you, I actually lived. You taught me what it meant to be genuine, to stop hiding behind roles and just be myself. You loved me for who I really was, and that changed everything." They held each other as darkness fell. Two old people who had somehow been lucky enough to find each other half a century ago and wise enough to hold on. The desert night wrapped around them, vast and ancient, and they were part of it, woven into the landscape through years of living and loving and working this hard, beautiful land. Kade passed away peacefully in his sleep on a cool October morning, Zara beside him as she had been for so many years. She held his hand and felt the exact moment he left, a subtle shift from presence to absence that broke her heart even as she was grateful he had gone gently, without pain or fear. The funeral was held in Bisbee, and the entire town seemed to turn out. Kade had been respected and liked, known as a fair man who kept his word and helped his neighbors. People spoke of his honesty, his skill with horses, his quiet kindness. Zara listened to it all, proud and devastated in equal measure. After the funeral, she returned to the ranch that was now run entirely by James and Helen. They wanted her to stay with them, to move into their house where they could care for her, but Zara insisted on remaining in the home she had shared with Kade. She needed the familiar rooms, the spaces they had moved through together, the memories embedded in every corner. The grief was heavy and strange. She had known losing Kade was inevitable, had been preparing for it in some ways for years. But the reality of waking up alone, of having no one to share morning coffee with, of facing the endless stretch of days without him, was harder than she had imagined. There were mornings she was not sure she wanted to get out of bed, afternoons when the silence of the house felt suffocating. But she did get up. She did keep going, because that was what they had always done, she and Kade. They had faced challenges and kept moving forward, and because she knew he would have wanted her to keep living, not just existing but actually engaging with life. Alice came to visit frequently, bringing her daughters and bringing news of the theater. The productions continued, the classes still ran, the dream they had built together was still thriving. Zara found comfort in this, in knowing that her work would outlast her, that something she and Alice had created together would continue to serve the community long after she was gone. She wrote more, working on a second book about the techniques of acting and directing that she had learned over her long career. It was not a memoir this time, but a teaching text, filled with practical advice and hard-won wisdom. She worked on it slowly, savoring the process, finding that the writing gave her days structure and purpose. James made sure she was cared for, checking on her daily and handling the business aspects of the ranch that she had never been particularly involved in. He was so much like his father, steady and capable, and Zara was grateful for his presence even as it sometimes hurt to see Kade's mannerisms reflected in their son. On the first anniversary of Kade's death, Zara rode out to their special spot overlooking the desert. It was hard to mount the horse anymore, her body stiff and protesting, but she managed it with James's help. She sat there for a long time, watching the sun set in shades of orange and purple, remembering the dozens of times she and Kade had shared this view. "I miss you," she said aloud to the empty desert. "Every single day. But I am all right. I am still here, still living the life we built, still grateful for every moment we had together. I hope, wherever you are, you know that. I hope you know that loving you was the best thing I ever did." The wind picked up, carrying the scent of sage and dust, and Zara chose to take it as an answer. She rode back to the ranch as the stars emerged, feeling sad but also somehow at peace. The grief would always be there, she knew, a permanent part of her landscape now. But so would the love, and the memories, and the knowledge that she had been extraordinarily lucky to spend 50 years with someone who had truly seen and loved her. Zara lived for 5 more years after Kade's death. Years she filled with grandchildren and writing and occasional teaching at the theater. Her health remained relatively good, though she moved more slowly and tired more easily. She celebrated her 80th birthday surrounded by family. 3 generations gathered to honor the woman who had chosen to stay in Arizona all those years ago and had, through that choice, shaped all their lives. She died quietly one spring morning, sitting in her favorite chair on the porch, looking out over the desert she had come to love. Alice found her when she arrived for their weekly lunch, and though she cried, she also smiled, knowing her mother had died exactly where she would have wanted to, in the home she had built with the man she loved, surrounded by the landscape that had taught her who she really was. At Zara's funeral, Alice stood before the crowded church and spoke about her mother's courage. She came to Arizona as an actress, Alice said, performing in a film that has long since been forgotten. She could have left after 3 weeks and gone on to perform in larger theaters, to become more famous, to have the kind of career society tells us we should want. But she chose something different. She chose love and authenticity and building something that would last. She chose my father and this place and the theater that still serves our community today. And in choosing all that, she taught me and my brother that success is not about external validation. It is about doing work you believe in, loving people truly, and having the courage to build the life you actually want instead of the life you think you should have. The theater was renamed in Zara's honor, and Alice made sure her mother's story was preserved, not just in the books she had written but in the living tradition of the theater itself. Young actors still learned from the techniques Zara had developed, still performed on the stage she had built, still carried forward the dream she had refused to abandon. And on the ranch, James's grandchildren grew up hearing stories about the grandmother who had faced down a mountain lion and the grandfather who had saved her, about how love had brought them together and determination had kept them together, about how 2 people from completely different worlds had built something real and lasting in the Arizona desert. The small house where Zara and Kade had spent so many years together stood for decades more, eventually becoming a kind of museum maintained by the family, a testament to the life they had built. And on clear evenings, when the sunset painted the desert in shades of fire, it was easy to imagine 2 figures sitting on the porch, holding hands and watching the light fade, still together even in memory, still part of the landscape they had loved so well. Their story became part of the local history, told and retold, embellished and simplified, but always containing at its core the same essential truth. That courage and authenticity matter, that choosing love over convenience is worth it, that building something real with someone who truly sees you is the greatest success a person can achieve. And somewhere in the telling and retelling, the story took on a kind of immortality, the way all good love stories do. It became a tale about finding yourself in unexpected places, about the moment when everything changes, about having the bravery to choose the road less traveled. It became a story about a cowboy who saved an actress from wild animals, and how she told him he was more real than any role she had ever played, and how they built a life together that proved that reality, when shared with the right person, is better than any performance could ever be.